Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salamun alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome to tonight's incredibly important and inshallah very insightful talk show. We have an amazing lineup of speakers today where we'll be discussing the role of religion in the face of oppression. I'm honored to introduce myself as your host for tonight. My name is Sabiha Muhammad Hussein Rashid. I studied politics and international relations at University of Birmingham, and I'm the president of the Development Society Youth Council Girls, also known as DS, which is the organizer of tonight's program. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our esteemed guests tonight and give a brief introduction of them all. First off, we're very pleased to be joined by Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, who is an activist and spokesperson for the Neturei Karta, an Orthodox Jewish community which is anti-Zionist. He's written several books and spoken at important international conferences on the occupation of Palestine. Next up, we have Father Frank Gelly joining in from London. Father Frank is a priest of the Anglican Church. He's a writer and activist committed to religious dialogue, justice, and spirituality. Next, I'd like to introduce Sheikh Kazim Bojani, who has joined us from the holy city of Qom. Sheikh Kazim is a student of the Islamic seminary in Qom. In addition to enjoying Islamic theology and philosophy, he takes interest in various socio-political issues relating to India and more generally issues of global importance. He's also been a mentor to me in my university years, and I consulted him numerous times for advice when writing my papers for his being informed about current and historical political issues. We'll also have Said Adil Raza, our resident scholar in Dar es Salaam, who will give a brief address at the end of the talk show. Lastly, we have Sister Nida Mukhtar, who is a stay-at-home mother residing here in Tanzania. She's also a student of the Islamic seminary and an active member of the Khoja community. A very warm welcome to you all today. Every last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan, we remember the oppressed of the world upon the call of Imam Khomeini and his designation of this day as Yom al-Quds, a remembrance of one of the greatest injustice of modern history, the occupation of Palestinian land by the Zionist Israeli entity. Together with that injustice, let us also bring to our attention the several incredible movements we see across the world, which are calling for the end of different types of oppression, such as the Black Lives Matter movement, the climate change movement for the environment, and let us also remember the oppression against the Uyghur Muslims in China, the Rohingyas in Myanmar, Kashmir, Pakistan, Yemen, African countries suffering civil wars such as Chad, Somalia, Sudan, and the likes. As a duty to our fellow brethren in humanity, let us keep all those suffering in our prayers, specifically during this holy month of Ramadan. Sister Nida, if I could start with you. You're a homemaker and a mother. You also devote some of your time to serve the religious community. Today, you're taking part in this evening's talk show. What would you have to say regarding the role that religion and religious sentiments can play in raising awareness and channeling emotional energy for getting justice for all the oppressed people and nations across the world?
Salamun alaikum. May Allah's peace be upon all of you here. Thank you for inviting me here tonight as we remember all the oppressed nations and all the oppressed around the world. It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us to use this opportunity in educating ourselves in a healthy way about the current situation happening in the world. As our topic is related to the oppressed around the world, I would like to begin with the ayat from the Holy Quran, chapter number 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 8. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm for Allah, witnesses in justice, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is acquainted with what you do. So, as we talk about religion, the role of religion is very vital. It's very crucial because religion gives us a way of life. It gives us the opportunity. It gives us social values. It gives so much importance to the social values, like social justice. And that's why religion plays a very important role, when we talk about oppression around the world. Religion is based on the innate nature of human being. We, as human beings, it's natural for us to like good and despise evil. It's natural for us to like justice and despise injustice. And that's why we see that religion is these innate values, and religion goes in hand with the innate nature of human being. Religion addresses these problems like injustice in a very like religion has the power to evoke most pure innate emotions like helping the oppressed and countering the oppressors. It gives a deeper meaning to these it gives a deeper meaning to it gives a deeper meaning to all this.
Indeed, religion awakens that spirit of change in us all. Father Frank, if I could bring you in next, why do you think the issue of the occupation of Palestine is so important today at a global and as well as a regional scale? Every year, the Day of Quds is specifically devoted to its remembrance, and of course, it acts as a precursor through which we remember the oppressed of other nations.
When I speak to you in the name of the one true God, I want to focus my first contribution on Jerusalem, because this is Al-Quds Day. Al-Quds means Jerusalem. And I want to start by quoting Jesus Christ, when in the Gospel of St. Matthew, he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered your children together, but you would not. So Jesus is alluding to rejection, a rejection which would be his own rejection. But I want to see this as it were, a prophecy of time to come, when of oppressions to come, of wrongs and evils to come. And what I want to say is that this could apply to Jerusalem today, because under Zionist occupation, under Zionist, Jerusalem has been seized by force by Zionists. So in a way, again, it harks back to what Jesus said. Jerusalem is a holy city, and it is sacred to all the three monotheistic religions, but its holiness has been disfigured by injustice, by oppression, by violence. The beauty of holiness has been made ugly by oppression. Now, I want to say in this respect that in 1947, the General Assembly of the United Nations passed a resolution which declared Jerusalem an international separate body administered by the United Nations in the name of the three great religions. Now, you would say that is as dead as a dodo, but the Vatican initially backed it, and as it were, it was an attempt by the international community to make Jerusalem, to recognize Jerusalem's special status. And because the three religions are, she's sacred, Jerusalem is sacred to our three religions. Now, the next thing I want to say is, as we know, this Al-Quds Day was instituted by Ayatollah Khomeini, for whom I have great regard. And he wanted us to remember Jerusalem on this particular day. We ought to remember Jerusalem at all times, but particularly on this day. But in this connection, I want to bring up another great religious figure, in this case, a Christian bishop, a man called Hilario Capucci. He was a Syrian Arab Christian. He was a bishop of a Syrian rite in Communion of Rome. I am incidentally an Anglican, I'm a Protestant, I'm not a Catholic, but we're all Christians. And Monsignor Capucci embraced the cause of Palestine from early on. He completely devoted himself to Palestine. You know, in 1974, Archbishop Capucci was arrested by the Israeli, let's say, authorities, although their authorities are nothing, and sentenced to many years in prison on the charge of smuggling arms to Palestinian resistance. So if you think of a bishop as someone who's a sort of snowflake, you know, he was a very combative figure. He served several years in prison. When he was released, thanks to the Vatican, but he went on fighting for Palestine, totally, completely committed to Palestine. In more recent years, he was on the Navi Marmara ship, which tried to force the Israeli blockade of Gaza. And she was boarded illegally, once again, by Israelis, and he was arrested, and eventually he was expelled. They put in prison because the Vatican interceded on his behalf. Now, I met Monsignor Capucci once in Rome when he was an old man, but as an old man, he kept fighting. He was at heart a Palestinian. Palestine, it was his cause. So, and I thought of him as a lion, He had something lion-like about him. So, the reason I'm mentioning this is because Ayatollah Khomeini, for Point of View Islam, Monsignor Capucci as a Christian archbishop, both fighters of the cause of Palestine. And they are examples to us how Palestine is in our hearts and we must fight on.
That was honestly so beautiful. Thank you so much. And I hope we can truly take inspiration from these lions, as you call them rightfully. Thank you very much. Moving on, I'd like to point out that with Al-Quds Day, it's commemorated across the world by not just Muslims, but anyone who is peace and justice loving. It's all about humanity. And that's why we invited such a diverse panel today to show that the injustice against Palestinians, or anyone for that matter, is not a religious one as often painted by the mainstream media, which is why we're incredibly honored to have Rabbi Weiss join us today. Rabbi Weiss, you're a Jewish leader of a significant pro-Palestine community in New York, and you define yourself as anti-Zionist, even though usually Judaism and the ideology of Zionism are conflated. Could you explain to the audience what the odds are between the two and why it is that you continue to support the Palestinian cause despite all the hate and backlash you face as a result?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. First, the first issue I must say is maybe you noticed we were putting up a sign here that says it's Friday, 3:30 p.m. And the reason for that is because we are Sabbath observers. And that means on Saturday, we're not allowed to use any electronics, anything like that. We rest on the Sabbath according to the laws of the Torah, and would not be permitted for me to do this on Sabbath. But by me, it is still Friday, very early Friday afternoon, many hours till the Sabbath, till the Shabbos Kodesh, to the Holy Sabbath. So that's why I'm on. I'll mention further a few times, other people will channel in later, that they should be able to hear clearly that I'm not speaking on the Shabbos into a phone. And again, I pray to the Almighty, He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message and so sanctify His name. And inshallah, with God's help, bring peace to the world. Assalamu alaikum, greetings to all. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your show. It's an honor and privilege because we feel it is our godly obligation to clarify to the world, to educate the world that this occupation is totally against the Jewish religion. It is against God. It is not, I am speaking here not because, not even though I'm Jewish, I'm speaking because I am Jewish, I am here. And as the commands of our rabbis, the great rabbis and chief rabbis of Palestine and of Jerusalem, which I'll mention a few, and with God's help, they should not be confused with the Israeli rabbinate or the chief, what they call chief rabbi of Israel, and the so-called Israeli rabbinate, which is a window dressing for their crimes. It has no legitimacy. It's really nothing. There is a rabbinate today, still there, and that is the ones that are the leading rabbis in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. And what my message is not my message. It is the message of Judaism that is true to the Torah, as we've been following for 3,000 years. It is very clear. And to that end, I will mention, and that in the United Nations documents, and you can look it up in the records. This is a meeting, a delegation of rabbis, which at that time in 1947, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky. They could go to my site, nkusa.org, or to the United Nations documents, and I'm just going to quote one line. The Rabbi Dushinsky, as the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, that was this main city, that meant really of Palestine, and this is his message. He pleaded with the United Nations a year prior to the ratification of the so-called Jewish state of the State of Israel by the United Nations. He pleaded with them as the representative and leader of the community. He said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." Now, I don't think anybody could accuse this rabbi or all our other religious rabbis who are, their lives are only to serve God, and they are the community that is there for hundreds of years, the God-fearing community. Anybody can accuse these people of being anti-Semitic. I mean, they are accused of being self-hating Jews and anti-Semitic, as I am. In fact, just this last week, they shut down our Facebook, our religious community's Facebook, because they say we write anti-Zionism. It's equated with anti-Semitism. So let me just explain. I mean, it's outrageous. It's unacceptable. But the point is, and then let me just say, when he passed with that rabbi, there was other rabbis, and then the last chief rabbi was taken up in 2002, and you can see hundreds of thousands of people. Actually, just in this street, there were over 10,000 people in this gathering, and they were all to welcome the chief rabbi. In other words, there's a tremendous, beautiful, large communities in the Holy Land, and throughout the world. Wherever you will go around the world, the very religious community is anti-Zionist. The reason is because it is Judaism and Zionism is diametric opposites. It's contradictory. It's just antithetical Zionism to Judaism. Judaism is subservience to God. It is the accepting of the bond that we did on Mount Sinai 3,000 years ago, and this is what we're following strictly, unswervingly till today. Zionism is a movement that started a little over 100 years ago. It is a transformation from this subservience to God to a base nationalism, a material concept. They should have a piece of land, an Olympic team, an army, so forth. Now, that issue of making this state is not only different from Judaism, but it is a rebellion against God's commands, because God warned us since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago that we were dispersed throughout the world, and we were put under oath by God not to return en masse, one oath, not to rebel against any nation, a second oath. We should be loyal citizens in every country we reside, whether it is Iran or the United States or any country where you have Jews. And thirdly, we are not to make any attempt to end exile. And Zionism breaches all of these oaths of God to the Jewish people. The rabbis in our communities and throughout our history, we went through the Inquisition, we went through crusades, we went through many, many suffering, and we had the ability, the capability of buying a piece of land, but the Jews never did that. Even in a place with uninhabited land, we would never make 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty, because we are an exile declared by God. We are not to make a so-called Jewish state. So this concept of a Jewish state would not be acceptable, even if Palestine would be uninhabited. But the fact that they went and they decided to make their state in a land that was inhabited by the majority Muslim people, and then a second community, the second largest, was Christian, and then there was a Jewish community, that the Zionists should come from Europe and decide to create their so-called Jewish state, this rebellion against God called the State of Israel, on the heads and shoulders of the Palestinian indigenous people, the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian, and the Jewish. This is again a tremendous an nakba. A nakba. It is a tragedy. It is a catastrophe. It is a rebellion against God directly. It has no acceptability in the Jewish Torah, and therefore around the world we've stood up and demonstrated. We are not to kill, we are not to steal. This is in the United States, in front of the White House. I could show you pictures from throughout the world, from England, London, from Montreal, from all over. Invariably, the very religious communities stand together in solidarity that there should not be the existence of the state of Israel. I want just to show you also that Jewish people make demonstrations constantly in Israel, and Jerusalem, and Al-Quds, and around the occupied Palestine, and they get brutally beaten constantly. You can go to our site NKUSA. You will see picture after picture of the inhumane treatment. And actually, our rabbis, not only are they inhumanely treated, but worse than that, they are even assassinated. Our rabbis have been through, from the 1920s, the first known the famous individual who was murdered by the Zionists was actually a Jewish person. He was named Dr. Dahan. He was a famous, there is a statue of him in Denmark. He came from Denmark. And he said he's going to reveal to the world that Jews are against this. Now, I just want you to know that till today, we are standing in solidarity, in opposition to this, and we refuse our boys and girls, although there is mandatory military service in the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, our children refuse, and they're ready to die. They do not get to serve in the army. They try to demean them by putting them on forcefully in the jails, the Israeli uniforms. But here you see where they're standing behind bars, crying. They're holding a prayer book and crying because we refuse to stand in service against this rebellion against God, to attack the Palestinians and to have a Jewish state. We just this recently, the settlers, as you know, were making more attacking the Muslim people. The last recently flamed up, and our rabbis put out a statement. The chief rabbi of Palestine today, nothing again to do with the Israeli rabbinate, which is a farce, and they put out statements in English, in Arabic, and in Jewish Hebrew, the real Hebrew, not Ivrit, the modern Hebrew. The Zionists even hated the old Hebrew because it's from God, and they made Ivrit, a new style of Hebrew. We don't use that. And they put out a statement in all three languages, decrying and speaking in the sharpest language against what these Zionists, what the settlers are doing. It's not in our. Yeah. So this is basically what our message.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think it's incredibly inspiring for us to see that, despite the reaction that you get from the majority of people from your community, you still decide to stand up with the truth. And I think the awareness of this community within the Jewish tradition hasn't got widespread awareness. So thank you for enlightening us on that. I'd like to bring in Sheikh Kazim now. Sheikh Kazim, the illegal state of Israel continues to steal more land from the Palestinians, and the suffering in many other countries as an effect of neocolonial policies continues to fester. All of this is perhaps possible due to the support that Zionism and other unjust ideologies get from world powers. Unfortunately, in the past year or so, we've also seen leaders of some Muslim countries sign deals of agreement with the Zionist entity and work hand in hand with world powers to be complicit in the injustice we see in the region, despite the outrage from their domestic populations. So how important is the role and complicity of these world powers, and now these Muslim countries such as Saudi, Egypt, and the likes, in the oppression of the Palestinian people and other countries in the region such as Yemen and Bahrain?
Yep. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. First, I would like to welcome all the respected guests and speakers. It was truly amazing to hear their words and the things that were mentioned. And the important and the common theme that was highlighted was this paradigm of oppression and justice. So the topic at hand, the issue of Palestine, and also the other issues that we have around the world today, from Yemen to Bahrain to many, many other issues, all of them, they fit in this discussion that we have regarding idea of justice and establishing justice and oppression. And here we gather today people from different religious backgrounds to see how these religions can work together to ensure justice and take a proactive stance against all these oppressive activities that are going on. But I just want to bring back the question, was the role of world powers in this misery that we see around the world today. So here we come to a very important point, that in addition to having the motivation to counter injustice, it's also very important to know what is the main source of this injustice and what is the root cause. So we see so many different problems around the world today, including the important problem, the issue of Palestine and the oppression in Palestine. But we need to go back and look at what are the roots of this injustice. And sometimes I feel that the biggest obstacle that we might have is that we might miss the root cause, and then we might focus even an entire lifetime countering secondary or even sometimes imaginary causes. So this calls for a lot of awareness, information, caution, and political smartness. So one of the most important, and if not the most important, roots of these oppressions is the oppressive global structures and systems in place that have roots in the colonial and imperial mindset. So the policies that are adopted by powerful countries and the systems they instate, the so-called world powers, when you see that inside their formations, these systems can be oppressive. But again, it's not something that's very easy to understand, and this is something which we can easily even understand in a span of few hours. But in the context of the question that was asked, I'll very briefly allude to the role of the dominant world powers in sustaining this oppression in Palestine for a long period of nearly 70 years. And again, I say this to my audience, it's not a small thing. The scale of oppression, the number of people they have been uprooted, who have been exiled, the thousands of people who have been killed. And the respected rabbi showed us some of the images of the atrocities that are even meted to the anti-Zionist rabbis and Jews. You can go and search online. Children, mothers, helpless people bombed with banned ammunition like phosphorus bombs. So how is it possible that such a mass scale oppression is sustained? The answer goes back to the alliance that is between Zionism as a political movement, and maybe more accurately as a very strong propaganda machinery, uh, and the world powers and the Arab states that are around the Palestine in the region. So it's a nexus between these three players that has led to the situation that we see in Palestine today. And again, the same story applies to the other problems that we see in the West Asia, by which I mean the Middle East region. So you see in Bahrain, again, it's the same issue. The governments that are in place there, the monarchies, in coordination with their supporters and backers, some of the Western powers, this is what is leading to a lot of misery. And also this example doesn't only apply to these topics. Even if you want to see the economic miseries and woes that we have around the world today, the root of these problems goes to the dominant structures in place which are guided by and set by these world powers. So I don't have much time. I'll just in a few minutes, I'll just mention that how they work together. So Zionism, more than being an ideology, is a political movement with a very powerful propaganda machinery and network. Although it tries to hide this face of it and tries to say that it's not something, it's just an ideology, something in people's mind. And any solution to the Palestinian problem cannot underestimate or overlook Zionism as a political movement. So Zionism established three goals for itself: colonizing Palestine, ensuring immigration of Jews to Palestine, and finding an imperial sponsor. So they knew that they would need support from some powers to be able to ensure and implement the first two goals. And as we saw, you can go and read the history, that they achieved the first two goals with ingenuity and impunity, driving out people from their lands and replacing with Jewish populations. And some have even said that this process resembled to the US elimination of Native Americans, whereby large Native communities were uprooted, displaced, exiled, and also attacked and met with violence, and you can see that this process still continues today. Destruction of Palestinian homes, confiscation of their lands, and then building of Jewish settlements on them. But all of this couldn't have happened without a colonial and imperial sponsor. They knew this, that we can't do this without this support. In the initial formative years, this support came from Britain. So we all know the famous or the infamous Balfour Declaration by British government in 1917, whereby, as said by Edward Said, so he said that it's very ironic and equally alarming. So Edward Said said that this statement was a statement made by a European power about a non-European territory in a flat disregard of both the presence and the wishes of the native majority resident in that territory, and it took the form of a promise about this same territory to another foreign group. It's very strange that someone promises somebody else's land to a third party. And then we know the succession of events to the formation of Israel. And then we know that when the power dynamics shifted towards United States, the Zionists ensured that they have enough say in the American political system, and they formed the single most powerful lobby, or maybe I should say it, a lobby that intimidates, that puts out propaganda against people. It does legal lobbying in terms of lobbying for their interest in the United States. So we see this today in terms of IPAC, Anti-Defamation League, and tens of others of Zionist organizations across United States that ensure that this imperial sponsor is going to be there to support them. But again, the colonial powers had their own interest in this story. So they were looking in the context of the Middle East to have, so after the fall of Ottoman Empire, this region was divided into small Arab monarchies. Again, none of these had any historical, geographical, economic, and social basis. So even the borders that we see today were something which was decided and enforced by the colonial powers of that time. So what happened was that from a colonial and imperial perspective, they needed to maintain economic and political dominance in the region, and especially the oil factor was very important. And all of this was happened in the name of quote unquote national interest. So they would say we are advancing our national interest by doing all these things. So it perfectly served their purpose that you have Israel right in the heart of these Arab countries, which would serve as a colonial and imperial outpost that would forever keep the region in turmoil, tension, conflict, and instability, surrounded by monarchies which are essentially undemocratic, who do not have enough public support, and more importantly, monarchies that have no reason to act in the interest of their own subjects. So imagine this setting where you have weak, divided Arab monarchies, which are economically, politically, militarily, in terms of their intelligence, are dependent on these Western powers. And in midst of that, you have the Zionist entity, which is going to ensure turmoil and problem in this region endlessly. So it was a two-way relationship that served the purpose of the Zionists. They wanted to colonize Palestine, so they needed the support. And on the other side, the colonial and the imperial powers, they saw their benefit in ensuring that this is going to happen. Just one last word I'll mention, and that is that the end result of all this was that it has only added misery to Palestinians, to the local populations that are there in these countries. Why? Because these governments who were supposed to protect the rights and interests of their own people and their neighbors have now actually turned against them. And a reflection of that you see in the normalization of relationship with Israel that some of these countries have signed in recent past. It is a sign of their utter dependence. Otherwise, if you think logically, what benefit these monarchies have by normalizing their relationship with Israel other than securing some of their needs, and which is a sign of their utter dependence on the Western imperial power. So this a triangle together has ensured that this oppression continues today. But there's one sign of hope that is always there, is that in all of these countries, as long as people are aware, people are on the streets, people are resisting, people are protesting, we always have hope, because no political power can sustain continuous resistance and public pressure. And this is what we hope, that a positive change will be initiated, whereby instead of serving their own monarchical interest, we hope for a day when these governments will change in a manner that they would serve their own people. The resources will be channelized for the benefit of the people in the region and the neighboring countries, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. It truly is an intricate relationship, as you so elaborately drew out for us. Thank you very much. And as you said, it's of utmost importance for us to be awake and aware of the root causes of these injustices. Father Frank, if I could bring you in again, as a leader of Christians, how would you suggest we can collaborate, and what practical measures can communities at large take to initiate change? And what would you say are some possible hindrances that can be faced in this endeavor?
One hindrance is the existence of a set of very bad people, very wicked people, who call themselves Christian Zionists. Now, starting by mentioning a great Christian, Monsignor Capucci, who devoted his life to Palestine, that there is a clique, a gang, a movement of people who actually had a congress in Jerusalem in 2001. They had about 700 delegates from 25 countries. And according to their own definition of Christian Zionism, which they call biblical Zionism, of course, it isn't biblical at all. They, quoting, they stated the firm belief that God chose the Jewish people and bequeathed to them in everlasting possession the land of Canaan. Now, Canaan is the biblical name for what is stated as Palestine, more or less. Now, I want to state that this ideology, Christian Zionism, is a fraud. They are a moronic sect. They are repulsive monstrosity, a nonsense which is not fit for human beings or Christians, but for beasts, for creatures without any intellect. I know it's a strong language, but I have to express my feeling about how bad these people are, because they are quite influential, especially in the United States of America. Now, please, let us not make a mistake. They're not, majority of Christians are not Christian Zionists in America, even the evangelicals, but this particular clique is apparently very influential. Now, a key figure in this travesty of Christianity was a man called John Nelson Darby, who was a former Anglican clergyman who actually later joined a sect called the Plymouth Brethren, another beastly type of religion. It's a fundamentalist and literalist body, which is now, thank God, semi-extinct. But if you want to read a great book by an English writer called Edmund Gosse, entitled Father and Son, Gosse was a man who had been brought up in this sect. And he writes later on the devastations which this kind of wrong-headed belief can have over the minds of young people. Now, there will be a lot to say here, and I'm trying to keep it short. Darby divided history in epochs which he called dispensations. In each period, he claimed, God deals with his creation in different ways. And he invoked as proof the passage in the New Testament, and again, take me too long going to it, which allegedly acknowledges this. Actually, that passage has nothing to do with dispensations, absolutely nothing to do with it. Darby was an ignoramus who beguiled and deceived people even more ignorant than himself. And this is really at the root of his ideology of Christian Zionism. The final epoch of dispensation of this lunatic was Christ's second Christ's second coming, which is a perfectly legitimate Christian doctrine. Every time I celebrate Holy Communion, I invoke the coming return of Christ. But this man Darby completely made a hash of it, and based on a misreading of a book of Revelation, the last book in the Bible, and St. Augustine, a great theologian and saint, dismissed completely. Now, the book of Revelation says nothing about Jews returning to the Holy Land in order for Christ to reappear, as Christian Zionists idiotically claim. As for the holy city of Jerusalem, there is a famous passage in the Gospel of St. John when he has a dialogue with an unnamed woman who asks him, where shall we worship God in future? On Mount Gerizim or in Jerusalem? And his reply is, I tell you, in future you will worship God neither on Mount Gerizim nor in Jerusalem, but in spirit and truth. Now, this is important because Jerusalem, never mind important, is only a city, and God can be worshipped everywhere. I've never been to the Holy Land. I don't need to go to the Holy Land to feel myself in tune with the teaching of Christ. So although Jerusalem has a historical and spiritual value, it is not essentially connected to what it is to be a Christian. Now, I have to say, I'm sorry about our friend of Rabbi, but I have to quote St. Paul, who says they call the church the Israel of God. So St. Paul doesn't talk about the land, any land which should belong to a particular race or religion. Anyway, I want to say that another main aim of Christian Zionism, running out of time?
Yeah, and also I just wanted to quickly ask you if you have any sort of suggestions for interfaith collaboration in terms of
well, interfaith is what I've been engaged in for about the last 20 years, and we talk and we write and we say friendship, but we're talking about Palestine, and the point is action. And we have this investment movement. When I shop in Tesco, I always make sure I do not buy Jaffa oranges, which are oranges coming from colonists, from Israelis, and so on. Small examples that we can all do our little bit. Every little bit helps. Now, as a Christian, I'm committed to peaceful means, but violence has to be resisted. And resisting violence is not wrong. And there are examples in Christian history.
Absolutely.
And I have
Thank
to
you
finish
so much, as you said. Yes.
By saying that, of course, Britain is a tiny bit responsible for the wrongs inflicted on the Arabs of Palestine. Balfour Declaration, we heard about it. It's a great foolishness. But today, this should be for us an incentive to stick up for the cause of Palestine. There is no magic wand. We cannot solve a problem overnight, but we must fight on. We must resist.
Absolutely, and we must do everything that we can in our own little ways, as you said. Thank you very much. Rabbi Weiss, I'd like to bring you back in to discuss the current situation in occupied Palestine. For the benefit of our viewers, I'll touch upon a few updates in terms of recent developments in the region. Firstly, we haven't seen a stop in the increase of settlements, and there have been violent escalations during this holy month itself, as you mentioned earlier too. We've seen attacks on Christian pilgrims and places of worship by Zionists. However, what we also see is a growing unity among Palestinian organizations, and clearly Israel is very fearful of this, specifically because at the same time we see what is an internal political paralysis and disarray in Israel, where Netanyahu is struggling to even form a government since recent elections and following the number of allegations against him. The Israeli government elite also feels significantly weaker following Trump's departure from the White House, and we see bin Salman in Saudi is also trying to make friends with Iran. So all of this is kind of weakening the system from within. What would you have to say in regards to the current state of affairs? Is there any progress for the Palestinian movement, and are we finally closer to a light at the end of this tunnel, essentially?
With the help of the Almighty. Well, first, again, I mentioned whoever's turning in now, it is Friday afternoon and not Saturday here in New York. My name is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss, because I see on the screen it says Rabbi David Feldman, who's my colleague And actually, he's actually speaking right now, as we are speaking here. He's in Houston, Texas, where they have in the street a protest for Al-Quds Day, and he's speaking over there. I am here, thank God, and my voice is carrying over to Africa, thank God. We hope throughout the world. Yes, first of all, I would like to say that with the history, it has been always, we've been living together in total harmony. The concept, the issue here is not a religious conflict. That's what Zionism wants to portray, that is the Muslims hate the Jews and they try to vilify the Palestinians and victimize the Zionists and their state by, of course, stealing the name Israel, which is Jacob in the Bible, taking the Star of David, and so they use a facade of holiness, and anybody who opposes them is anti-Semitic and so forth. And this is something that is, of course, unacceptable. They're stealing our identity. It's a crime against God. Throughout this whole escapade and this occupation, we've been even before Zionism formed the state, as soon as they started encroaching upon the Palestinian area, the Jewish people have been up in arms and standing in opposition. We have, again, the facts and the thing. Well, this is when there was the Orient House. This is after, of course, but we have the days prior to the state, and then we have when there was the Palestinian Authority set up, and I could go, on and on, showing you pictures of this. But the important thing is that what we try to do, and what we try is we stand in solidarity and demonstrate together in every country possible, whether it's Jordan, it's Turkey, or this is in South Lebanon. We do not get into political issues, Shia or Sunni or whatever it may be. We approach all. We stand together with all, whether it is President Abbas or it is in Gaza with the leadership of Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas. So we always, at the time then, we try to do our utmost to tell the world, and the Christian Zionists, mind you, we go every single year with God's help to Washington, D.C., where they take over the convention hall in Washington, and we stand tirelessly in front of the convention hall, and we with signs, and we try to approach people over there and let them know that they're being duped, that this is not anything to do with Judaism or the Torah. If anything, what it has to do with, it is unfortunately brainwashing the gullible youth of the settlers and so forth, that they think they're doing something right, while they're trying to hide the fact that the core of Judaism, the most religious and the saintly rabbis, like in New York, across from Manhattan, Williamsburg, and there's not one Israeli flag, all the distinguished rabbis, the truth of Judaism is opposed. We try to educate both the Jews, which we can go out constantly in front of the United Nations and around the world, whether it would be in Geneva, when we went to the EU, where we try, whenever Durban, South Africa, when there was the famous against xenophobia and racism in the United Nations. So what we try to do tirelessly, with God's help, is to let the world know that this is nothing to do with the difference of religion. It is a simple, flawed political movement, that a selfish political movement to create a sovereignty that's unacceptable in a land of others. And we cry and hurt with the Palestinians. We have fast days for this. Now, in the Torah, it says, God says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. The state of Israel will end one day, and you see that every 10 years or less they have wars. They thought by this, what they call the 6-Day War, that they will have this miraculous and this and that, and that they're going to have peace. So they made the Camp David, they make an Oslo Accords. They said now there'll be peace. But we kept on saying that as long as you're rebelling against God, as long as there's 1 inch of this sovereignty, it cannot be. We want there to be peace, but there cannot be peace in a situation where you are occupying another people, you are stealing and killing and rebelling against God, and that's issue, and in the issue of having the Jewish sovereignty. So therefore it will end. We certainly pray to God, and we urge everybody to pray that it should end speedily and peacefully. But we urge everybody to do as we are doing. Do not be intimidated by the attacks that you are anti-Semitic. Stand up for the people of Gaza, of Palestine, in the refugee camps all over, and of course other human rights issues. But here we're talking about something that is being done in our name and something that the Jews should be doing here, and of course everybody else involved should be standing here, because this issue of Palestine may be the core that there's repercussions in other lands. So it's really, really critical that people should be standing and telling the world this is not acceptable. It has nothing to do with religion, because you can look at the rabbis and the communities in Palestine that were there for hundreds of years. They were the community. And you look around the world, and that people are making a simple mistake in what this is. It's a new movement, relatively new movement over a little over 100 years. The state exists a little over 70 years. They are crouching upon the base where people live together in peace and harmony. It's like taking a square and trying to put it into a circle. We plead with everybody, really, that first of all, they shouldn't call it a Jewish state, because that is the way that the Zionists attack them, as being anti-Semitic. They should call it clearly a Zionist state, unacceptable, and constantly people should be pointing out to the fact that the very religious Jews oppose this around the world, and that we can, and we will, it will end, because it's in God's hand. The world is in God's hand. This will end. The question is when, with prayer, that it should happen speedily and peacefully, and continually, stubbornly, we should stand up together and help the people of Gaza, help the people of Palestine. And we appreciate Ayatollah Khomeini, who clearly wrote constantly and spoke, he differentiated clearly between Zionism and Judaism. In fact, in his country, in Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, there's synagogues and community where they can go to the synagogue proudly. There's the signs of the synagogue, where in Europe, many places, they don't put up the sign of the synagogue. People pray there and they uphold the religion. We're saying, therefore, thank you, and we hope that there should be peace in the world, but all the world, Zionism tries to accuse Islamic Republic of being anti-Semitic because they differentiate between two, and they undermine what this issue is, that Zionism is unacceptable. Therefore, we hope they should have success and peace in the world, so that we should be able to live together in peace and in a free Palestine.
Thank you so much. If I could sum up what you said is, raise awareness, stand up for the truth, and stand together. Thank you so much. Sheikh Kazim, if I could ask you the same question, are we nearing an end to this injustice? We see violence and exploitation across the world. We see uprisings in Latin American countries, the Middle East, Syria, Bahrain, Kashmir, Sudan, gun violence and racism in the US, intolerance towards religious practices in France. The list is endless, where groups of people are persecuted for standing up for their rights. How can we play a part in paving the way for a more just world?
So that's a very important question, because that's one of the things that we want to take from this event that we had today, is to have some look at some solutions and how we can work together. As the respected Rabbi pointed out, that if we channelize our energies together and know this and emphasize this, it's not a religious issue, it's a humanitarian issue. It's about people who have been expelled from their land based on a political movement called Zionism. If we come together, different religious groups, then definitely there's much that can be done together. But sometimes when you look at the scale of these injustices and also the wide range of issues that you mentioned, so Palestinian issue is definitely very important, and as a respected guest pointed out, that it has repercussions in other parts of the world as well. So it's not a lone issue just focusing on that one territory. It has repercussions for many, many other places around in that region. So sometimes when we see that so much injustice at that scale, we might feel dejected. We might feel that we are very far from that light and that victory of truth and justice. But when you bring in the religious perspective, and you see that there's a lot of hope even in the darkest times. So Why? Because we know that there's so much positive energy, there's so much God given energy in people that, and their love for justice, that if it's channelized in the right manner, believe me, in a miraculous and speedy manner, all these injustices can be undone. And I really like the word that was used, that we need to be like stubborn in our resistance. We need to be constantly resisting, have that energy, that enthusiasm, be very optimistic. And every difficulty should not only make us dejected, but should add to our motivation and determination, and should give us new energy to fight. And also add to that the promise that the divine religions that have given us, that this misery, this human misery and injustice and oppression will eventually come to an end. And the future of humanity is bright. With all these ups and downs, humanity will eventually make it to its final destination of peace, justice, true spirituality, and as was mentioned, that our ultimate goal is submission and connection to God. We are here to serve God, to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you come to the Islamic scriptures, this idea of ultimate victory of truth is very, very clearly mentioned. So let me just read one passage. So this is chapter 21, verse 105, whereby the Holy Quran, the holy book of the Muslims, uh, it says, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ. It says, certainly we wrote in the Psalms of David. So it's referring to the Psalms of David. What did we write? أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا إِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. That indeed my righteous servants shall inherit this earth. So this is a promise that we have, that eventually the victory is for the truth. Eventually the victory is for the righteous people. So this gives us a lot of hope when we come to these situations. So these promises tell us that even in the hardest of times, we need to keep our focus, we need to resist, we need to be able to counter these difficulties. And I'll just mention one or two simple few things about what we can practically do. So, of course, when you look at all these different issues and problems that we have at hand, from the issue of Palestine, which we are focusing on today, but even other issues that were mentioned, Bahrain, Yemen, Black Lives Matter movement, and so many other things, one key word, and which is also pointed out by the respected rabbi, was that we need to be doing our duty and we need to be resisting. So this key word of resistance in its right manner, which means that we never give in. We never submit to oppression. We never let it become normal for us. Why? Because that's what the other side wants us to end up in. We become dejected. We said we can't do anything. It becomes normalized for us. We don't see the Palestinian problem. We don't see other problems. That's the last thing that we want to do. Of course, all of these different problems have their own solutions, but because I'm talking to because the main audience, this program is organized by a Muslim Shia 12er community based in Tanzania. So I'll directly address this last part to them, because this is an important question, I feel, because sometimes this question comes that what can we do? Or even sometimes people say, can we even do anything? We are an insignificant player. We are no one. How are we going to have any impact? So the answer to that is that no, we have to believe that we can make a change. And believe me, sometimes small efforts that were started thinking that these are insignificant or not useful, in a long term, they materialize into a movement, something that had a real and a big impact on these issues. And other thing, and this is very important, that even let's say our capacities are limited, we look at it as our duty. It's our human duty. We have a heart. We have this pure divine sensibility inside us. When we see oppression, we don't like it. When we see these videos, these images, this unnecessary story of continued oppression, our heart burns. So when we see that, okay, let me do this as a duty. Maybe it might not have a significant impact, but I feel that I have performed my duty. And then today, when we live in a global community with so many means of communication, sitting in Tanzania, you can do things of global significance. Believe me, it takes the right planning, right dedication. You can do something right, sitting right in your home, that can have global importance. Of course, there's a long list of things. Because my time is limited, I would just read out what are the practical things that we can do, and some of them were mentioned by the respected guests. So I'll just quickly going to read out what can we do. Uh, there are many things that we can do. So the first thing to know is that there's so many things that need to be done and are not being done. So I'll just read a quick list. One is you can do media work. In today's time, it's easy to do media work. So let's say you focus on the issue of Palestine, or you choose a set of issues that you want to focus on. You do media work, produce images, posters, podcasts, short videos, lectures, courses, raising awareness of this topic. This is something which definitely we can do. We can do events and programs related to this. So, for example, this event itself is an example of having an event to raise awareness about this topic. We can organize protests in our locality. So, for example, the Quds Day is an annual opportunity for people around the world. And again, as it was mentioned by the host, that it's not something to do with Shia Muslims. It's not even something that's limited to Muslims. It's something that's for everyone to do. And we see, and sometimes it's very amazing to see that even those communities that are not Muslims, they take active participation in these issues. Why? Because they see the human suffering in these things. So you can do events, protests, or in other words, you can do street activism. It puts a lot of pressure. It has a lot of symbolic importance. Your local authorities, they'll take a notice of this. You can do a lot. You can do advocacy and legal work. There's a lot of advocacy and legal work that can be done in this regard. So again, because I'm speaking to a Muslim audience, I'll give example of something like IHRC in London. So Islamic Human Rights Commission. So they do this kind of advocacy and legal work. So any of these problems comes, there are legal ways of helping and supporting and trying to solve these kind of issues. And of course, there are more other topics that you can get involved. So economic pressures, boycott activism. So let me even mention the BDS movement, which is also referred to by the Father Frank, that we should be careful that when we are buying, our economic relationships should not be in a manner that they help the oppressive entities, be it the Zionist entity or other oppressive entities. So BDS movement, by boycott, disinvest, and sanctions movement, has been able to work on this front, raising awareness that why? Because one of the important needs of the Zionist entity is the economic aid and support it needs through its local economy and also through the foreign aid. So that's also one of the areas where we can want. So, let me summarize. What I'm trying to say is that, look, there's so much that we can do. And it doesn't matter how insignificant it looks apparently. What matters is the value it has near God and the value it has for our own selves, that I'm doing my duty. I'm not unconcerned about the sufferings of my fellow human beings. And that's, as I would say, it's a duty that any human being would accept. It's a duty that all religion and all religious streams and currents subscribe to. And it's something that can even unite different and a variety of religious groups to come together and put a formidable front against all these different things that are around us. And inshallah, just the last word is that believe me, the future is definitely very bright. And as the respected rabbi mentioned, that this oppression will eventually end. But the question is how and in how much time? That depends on how active the people, wherever they are, they participate in this movement, they put a strong defense and front resisting this oppression. And we really pray to God that the victory of the oppressed people, the people who are deprived, who are suffering around the world, in Palestine, in Yemen, in Bahrain, in Kashmir, different parts of the world, even in America, United States, the different issues that they're facing, we pray to God that through the contribution of enlightened human beings, all these sufferings would come to an end, inshallah.
Inshallah, thank you so much for the exhaustive and very inspiring address. Thank you. We're short of time, so I'll just quickly ask Sister Nida her final question. As a woman and a mother, Sister Nida, what advice would you give to us women and young girls as to how we can play our part in building a justice-loving community of people who are aware of what goes on politically and who have the motivation to do, the list that Sheikh Kazim mentioned to us, all the things that are possible for us to do, because whether we like it or not, these political issues affect us and those around us. So, what advice would you give us?
So as a mother, I think that as a mother, we play a very, as a woman, our major role is a role of a mother, and that's why our duty is very important, because the children, they are copycats, they imitate us. So if we want these values to be instilled in our children, that they should be justice loving, they should be aware, they should not be unconcerned or indifferent towards what is happening in the society. First of all, we have to ourselves reflect on our own actions. What are we doing and how are we reacting? So it's very important that the child, the child is an imitator. He imitates, he absorbs quickly. Small children loves to imitate their parents. So it's very important that in the family, in the house, the family system should be in such a way that the lifestyle should not be very extravagant or lavish, in which that the child becomes unconcerned and doesn't know about any difficulties of life. So it's very important that we should give the children a bit of difficulties also, not so that they don't become very careless in the thing that is happening in the world. Another point is our interactions with the people around us and our interaction with the children themselves, how we interact with them. Are we harsh towards them? Are we severe towards them? Are we using force, our power to the child who is helpless, who cannot defend himself? So these experiences affect the children. The child will grow up with these experiences. So it's very important, and it's very much in our Quran and in our traditions. It's not allowed to. It's not have such attitude towards children, because it creates effect in the future of the children. And one more point is like when these activities are happening, and when these things, like for example, the events that are happening around the world, we discuss them at home. We discuss with the child, of course, according to their age, according to their understanding level. We talk about them. So the child sees that my parents are concerned. I live in a family who is not a selfish family, a family who values these values, and it has principles, justice-loving principles. And we can brainstorm with the children that what possible solutions they can come up with. So the child gets these values from the parents themselves and grows up in an environment when these values are glued in his heart. When they grow up, these values will manifest themselves in him. So when their age is appropriate, we can show them, we can educate them through books, documentaries, participation in solidarity movements, rallies, and protests. It's very important that child comes out and sees what's going around in the world. That's how they will feel, because what the enemy wants is that we should be scared, we should sit in our homes, we should not come out, we should not raise our voice, we should always have an apologetic attitude towards standing for truth. So if our child sees that my parents are not out there, my parents are having an apologetic attitude, they will not get confidence in standing up for the truth, standing up for the justice. So if I want my child to stand up for justice, so I have to make sure that I myself also come out and take my children to such events where they can explore, they can learn, and they can have a first-hand experience of such things.
Thank you.
And lastly, is dua. Yeah.
No, carry on.
So
please.
dua also plays a very important role in the success and upbringing of children.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a very powerful and practical list that, inshallah, we can all implement in order to not allow our children to become desensitized. Thank you. We've come to the end of the program. I'll just hand over to Sayyid Adil to give the final address, and then we'll close from there.
I'll just add one. Just I want to speak for us. I just want to thank everyone who participated today in this event, and really a big thanks goes to our respected guests that are here. Uh, Father Frank, Rabbi Weiss, who joined us from New York, also Sister Nida Mukhtar, and also a resident alim of the Dar es Salaam Jamaat, Sayyid Adil. I would also like to extend my thanks and appreciation to the Khoja Shia Isna Shari Jamaat, who availed us this platform and who supported in happening of this event, and especially the DS who made this program happen. So I just wanted to take 1 minute to thank everyone for this wonderful program, and we hope that this would be a start of something that would help us raise awareness. So such programs are definitely very much need of the hour. So not only related to the different international events and happenings that are relevant to us, but even something that locally is happening in our own country, to have awareness of these topics is definitely something that would help us grow as a community, inshallah. So thank you, everyone. May God bless you and help you, inshallah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much as well. And I was going to thank the speakers as well for joining us today. Rabbi Weiss, Father Frank Geli, Sheikh Kazim, Sister Nida, thank you so much for such an enlightening session. Inshallah, I'll just quickly give a conclusion and then say that Adil can give his final remark. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the awaited Imam of our time so that we can fully achieve this justice and peace that we talked about so much today. And we hope that this session will be a step towards further interfaith collaboration for justice. And we hope that our efforts also help to rekindle the spark for working towards change within the community, inshallah. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and please let us listen to Sayyid Adil's address now. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alillah. Amma ba'ad. Faqad qala al-Hakim fi kitabih al-Kareem wa qawluhu al-Haq. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alaysa subhu biqareeb. It will be an honor for me to become a part of the discussion group. Alhamdulillah, the speeches of the scholars, the point that scholars has been mentioned in their discussion are very clear. I didn't want to repeat those points. They have been mentioned in their speeches and their programs. Just I would like to thank the Development Society of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, under the KSIJ. Alhamdulillah, they organized this program to bring awareness among our youths. I just request all the youths of the community to go to the YouTube channel of Dar es Salaam Media Room Dar es Salaam and just listen to the speeches of our scholars. You will benefit from their speeches and their point of views. And inshallah, this will become, as our brother mentioned, Kadim, that it will be a startup for them. Inshallah, will continue this kind of the programs in future to bring more awareness in our youths and in our community members. Just I would like to mention 2 points here at the end that our youths are asking these questions continuously. Number one is why this program is organizing in the month of Ramadan, why are not in the other months and other days. The answer to this question is the month of Ramadan is the month of purification of the soul, purification of our soul or spirit. We know that without keeping away from the oppression or oppressors, we can't reach to the status of purification. This month of Ramadan, by standing against the oppressors of the time and supporting the oppressed ones of the world, we will reach to the status of the purification. And also in the month of Ramadan, in the daily prayers, we continuously prayed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allahumma adkhil ala ahli al-qubur surur. We prayed for every human being of the world that their status and their situations become better. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change their situation, to change their life in this world. Just praying is not enough. By protesting against the oppressors of the time, we are practically proving that not we are only praying to change the situation, but we also becoming one of the person to bring the change in the communities. This is the basically in the month of Ramadan we are very much keen to organize this kind of the programs. And the second reason is on the night of the Shahadat of Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, we repeated the saying of Imam Ali, the will of Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, kuna lizzalimi khasman walil madlumi awna, become the enemy of the oppressors and the supporter of the oppressed one. Just listening to that will of Imam Ali is not enough. Practically, we have to show that, yes, we are there to stand against the oppression and to raise our voice against the oppressors of the time, whether that oppression is in the domestic level in our countries or in the international level or some other countries too. And also one of our Maraji and the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Imam Khomeini Rahmatullah Alayh, has advised all the Muslims to come out and at least fix one day on the last Friday of the month of the Ramadan to raise their voice against the oppression happening in the various parts of the world, especially the Zionism and the Zionist lobby. Because we know that the Zionist lobby is basically the sign of the oppression in this world. Whatever happening in other countries, when we go and search the reason behind that, we will see the hand of the Zionist lobby. Their influence in the other countries. They're taking part in the other countries too to create disturbance in the countries and to kill the innocent people and to bring the to influence their ideology in the other countries too, because they become the sign of the oppression. We have to raise our voice to against the Zionist lobby and the Zionism. And other thing that I mentioned today is Friday's prayer. After Friday prayer, that is the all kind of the oppression has been doing by the Zionist lobby in the Palestine. Whether if you call killing is the oppression, they are doing. Sieging is the kind of the operation they are doing. And we know that the bombardment is the operation they are doing. Any kind of the operations are there in the is a Zionist lobby against the Palestine. Whatever they want, they are doing. By supporting the other oppressors of the world, they are trying to hide their oppression in the Palestine. And also in the other part of the world, we have to raise our voice against this Zionist lobby and the Zionism. It is part of our, not only the religious point of view, but also part of our humanitarian thought. And by nature, we are against the oppressors of this world. Alhamdulillah, we are organized one program. Inshallah, we'll continue in the next programs too. This time is not enough. I am very much keen to listen to the scholars more and more. They will not have the enough time, inshallah. I will request the DS use of the community to organize this type of the programs. Inshallah, we'll get the more benefit from these point of use of our scholars. I will invite the other scholars to join these kind of the programs. Inshallah, will bring the awareness. That ayah that has been mentioned today, I was just listening to the speech of Ayatollah Khamenei today. On the back of Ayatollah Khamenei, there was a screen on the wall. This ayat has been written, Alaysa subhu biqarib. Normally, when the victory will be there, when the people of the Palestine will get the victory, when they will be become victorious, this verse of Quran indicates that, don't worry, continue your resistance, stand against the oppressors. Alaysa subhu biqarib. The morning is there to come into your life, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Sayyid, for the enlightening and very encouraging address of yours. Just really quickly, thank you all once again for joining. Thank you, Rabbi Weiss for sticking to the end. Father Frank had to leave for another Quds Day program. Thank you once again, Sheikh Kazim, Sayyid Adil, Rabbi Weiss, Sister Nida, and thank you to the organizers of this event, and thank you all for being an amazing audience and tuning in. Have a good night, inshallah.
Thank you.